All right, we're back once again. The season is drawing closer, which means more conference previews, Big 12 edition. Talked about the SEC, talked about the Big 10, talked about some of our win totals already, but we're about to dive into 16 more teams, try to find some actionable spots, and just talk about this conference as a whole. I'm Ben Rasa. That is Matt Gajewski. This is Betting You. Let's get started, sir. Probably going to be a theme of every single one of these videos. I like to jump right into it and ask you, what do you think about the conference chances to get representation or multiple bids to the playoff?
It's up for grabs, which makes it fun, which is, typically the case with this conference. But generally in the past, there's been two favorites. Those two teams are off to the SEC in Texas and Oklahoma, and they've slipped up plenty of times as well. Now to replace them, this is on top of what they did last year, bringing in like Houston, BYU, Cincinnati, and UCF. They had the four corner schools formerly of the Pac-12. So you get Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and Arizona State, which is kind of just a lot more middling teams to add to the pack. And we see this reflected in a lot of the conference odds. Who comes out of this conference? I don't know. How many do they get in? Well, they have to get in at least one. And I think there's a decent shot they get in two, just because who else are you going to put in? I think the SEC and the Big Ten each get three. I also think the ACC is probably going to get one. Notre Dame's one. You have obviously the G5 champion. So between the Big 12 and the ACC, one of these conferences is going to get two. I think the Big 12 plays easier schedules overall, so I'm going to lean them, but I don't feel confident. What do you think on that? Do you think they get two?
I think they definitely can get two. I would say that I think they're dogs to get to. I don't really like this conference. I don't know. There's a lot of cannibalization.
Yeah, I think they have the easier path to getting to schedule-wise. Some of those ACC teams at the top play brutal schedules, but I think those teams are better. So I don't know how the committee is going to weigh the strength of schedule. Like Clemson's playing Georgia in week 1. Utah's not doing that. No. If Utah has a better record by one game than Clemson, who are, assuming they don't just get the auto bid, who are they going to take? I don't know the answer to that, and it's going to be interesting. But I think schedule-wise, there is a leg up for some of these teams, assuming they take care of business, which is never something we should assume in this conference.
Isn't that the truth? But let's dive into it, and let's dive in with Utah. We're going to start right there with a team that, the books are saying they have maybe the slight inside path and a wide open conference to get that representation. Over 9.5 wins, juice to the over at -158. What remains? I mean, last year we spent months saying Rising, if when he's not ready. So what's the status now, and what do you make of Utah?
He's had about 18 months to get healthy from.
I mean, he better be ready now.
Yeah. He initially tore that ACL in the bowl game and then missed all last year. Probably a smart move. They turned in a pretty good season considering what they were trotting out there. They basically didn't have a quarterback that could throw the ball. And this team is excellent in terms of coaching. You're going to see that they develop talent better than almost anyone. So while they don't really recruit that well, this year they were 12th in recruiting for reference. It's not a huge concern. And it wasn't just Rising who was hurt. This team had a ton of injuries. They were very injured across the offensive line. They were starting some freshmen in that unit. And they had some receivers go down. Their tight end, obviously, Brant Keithy, didn't play. Bunch of injuries on defense, pushing young guys in. And they still played reasonably well, which cost me a lot of money because, through these injuries, I'm betting against him. And every single week, Whittingham gets him ready for these games. As far as this year goes, I think getting back a lot of these guys is going to help them. So now, in addition to some of that young experience you accrued, Rising's back. Your offensive line should be better. They're starting like freshmen like Spencer Fano, but he was a 4-star. Now that he's a 4-star freshman who has a year of experience under his belt, he should be better. I still have questions outside of these guys. First off, they've been very vocal about not wanting to run Rising, which kind of makes sense. It's what got him hurt. But that's also probably his best trait. He wasn't great as just a pure pocket passer. 46th most efficient quarterback in his healthy season. Exact same amount of big-time throws, his turnover-worthy plays. I don't really like offenses that are kind of neutering some of the best skills of their QBs. And, if he gets hurt, the season's over. But if you neuter him, the season's probably over anyway. You could probably still win a lot of games. So I don't really know what to make of that. Their receivers, I have questions. Why did Dorian Singer have 1,100 yards in 2022 and then not get to 300 with USC last year? I don't know the answer to that. Outside of him, I don't really know who you look back on and feel good about. Like Money Parks has been bad. Munir McCabe's been bad. Micah Pittman got hurt in just 2 games last year. I'm not really sure what he is. Tight end is awesome. This is not a question. Keithy, Landon King, he got a ton of experience last year and was good when Keithy was out. So that's solid. Add Carson Ryan. Defense, I think people are just, I don't know. This was a huge difference between us and other people last year. They graded out 62nd on defense. They were 61st in run defense and 72nd in pass rush. This was not a good defensive line. Everyone was saying, Utah has the best trenches in the Pac-12. You could run on this team really with no problem. They do have 3 edges back, so that's somewhat noteworthy. They lost their top edge. The interior, I have a lot of questions. It's a ton of transfers, and I don't know if some of these guys are going to play the edge or sit inside, but BYU, UTEP, Utah State, they're not really exactly awesome players. And then the guys they return inside were bad. So I don't know what to make of that. The secondary should be good, I'll say that. But, if maybe there's a discrepancy between public perception and what this team actually has on the inside, that could be an angle. But at the same time, do you really want to bet against Whittingham not coaching these guys up? And I don't think I want to make that bet. So right now I'm leaning stay away. What's your read?
I lean over. It's not, again, it really depends on how many win totals you're looking to. It's mostly product of the schedule. It's really manageable. You go to Oklahoma State and you go to the bounce house at the end of the year in UCF. Those are winnable games. They're tough games, but they're winnable games. They don't play Kansas State. Their non-con is very manageable. I don't know. I see them getting to 10 or 11 the majority of the time. Not even saying they're a great team. I just think they beat up on most of these teams. I think it's pretty manageable.
Yeah, they basically did this last year, and they didn't have Rising. So some of the depth questions you might have with other teams, I don't know if it matters as much with Utah State just because they're so well coached. And I don't know, the players that were bad, I don't want to take an under on this team really ever or bet against them early, because if you do that, you're betting against this coaching staff, which just year over year has been awesome at developing talent. So, a freshman that underperformed in Spencer Fano at tackle, do you really want to bet against this 4-star player not getting coached up to be a pretty good player? I don't want to make that bet. So I think I'm just staying away.
Kansas State is a team I just mentioned, not on that schedule, but they're getting some buzz. They're getting some love. They're definitely getting some hype, and it's not just them. Their quarterback, who I thought was pretty damn electric when we did see him, is certainly getting some noise that maybe he takes a huge leap forward here. 9.5 wins. It is juiced to the under. I want to hear your thoughts on Avery Johnson. I want to hear your thoughts on just this team in general.
I think the schedule is harder to start with. Got a couple tricky road trips. You're going to Iowa State and West Virginia. You got to play Kansas. Kansas is playing their home game, some at Arrowhead, and I believe they're playing their non-con at this soccer stadium. So that's a weird place to go to. And you have Arizona in non-con. There's some weird non-conference stuff with the Big 12 having so many new teams. There were previously scheduled non-con games against mainly these Pac-12 teams that they couldn't figure out. So, Arizona in non-con, that's not a conference game, but still, that's a tough non-con game. I don't think you would choose that. But as far as this team goes, they lose their OC, Klein, and they bring in Matt Wells. I think this is a pretty good hire. He, was a failure as a head coach. But as an OC and a quarterback's coach, he was pretty good. He worked previously with Jordan Love. So with your young signal caller, Avery Johnson, taking over Will Howard, that's probably a good thing. He was amazing as a runner, but kind of suspect as a passer. Completed 56% of those balls for 7.3 yards per attempt. His weapons aren't any better. They might not be worse either, but losing Phillip Brooks and Ben Sinnott to the NFL is definitely going to be hard to replace. But they were really banged up at receiver. That allowed guys like Jace Brown, Jaden Jackson, and Keegan Johnson, to get a lot of snaps. And I think they're solid there. So he has weapons. The biggest concern is this O-line. They lost 3 players from this unit, and the 2 guys they return are their guards. Those were the 2 worst players from this unit. They backfilled with a North Dakota State transfer, and then they're just standing on depth. They have some 4-stars in this unit because, they've been a power run team for so long. They can actually coax some of the 4-stars there. But can these newcomers block? I don't know. This is a question we haven't had to ask ourselves for a while with Kansas State. And that applies to Avery Johnson. It applies to Giddens and Edwards out of the backfield. Not going to have as much room to run. And then on defense, this team was 66th overall last year, had a terrible pass rush and run defense. Who do they have back? They, I think, lost some of their better players, but Jonah Alice being gone is huge. Or excuse me, that's Utah. On the defensive line, losing, like Nate Matlack and Javon Banks, I don't think this is going to be exactly great for them. And who did they add? They have an Austin P transfer. So, turning to the FCS is not great. Up front, I think they're going to get run over. And this is a conference that has a lot of good offensive lines like Oklahoma State, Kansas, Iowa State, even Utah if they put it together. Having these weaknesses on defense up front is a concern for me. Their secondary is good, but again, Utah's not going to try to really push the ball over the top. Oklahoma can if they want. Oklahoma State can if they want, but I'm not sure they will. Kansas is going to try to run. So I don't really know if they're built to win in this conference. What do you think?
I'm kind of indifferent. I don't think it's just going to be that smooth sailing. West Virginia's on this schedule as well, who I'm really high on. Just a lot of tricky games. I think we'll learn a decent amount about them in the Tulane game, and then we'll see. They have an opportunity to win a bunch of games this year, and if Johnson is that good and he develops at he could be really, really good. But to me, it's just a team that's going to be up there. I don't think this is the type of team that weasels into the playoffs. Obviously, they've got past. There's no doubt. But I don't really see it, to be honest. I think for me, I have a team like Utah ahead of them, and so do the books. But I kind of want to just loop in the third team here, which is Oklahoma State. Where are they in your rankings for this conference?
They might have the easiest schedule of these teams. So I think, Utah's schedule is pretty easy. And I think the difference between them and Kansas State largely is schedule based. I think Utah's roster is a little better, especially on defense, where I had a lot of questions with Kansas State. But this Oklahoma State team, I don't think they're as challenged schedule wise. South Dakota State, that's a good a good FCS team, but it's still an FCS team. You should handle them. You play Tulsa, and then you have a bunch of teams from the bottom of this conference: BYU, Baylor, Arizona State. Colorado, TCU, and Texas Tech are towards the bottom. Those are more coin flippy to me. But still, you dodge a lot of the top teams in this conference. You only play Utah, Kansas State, and West Virginia. Now, some of those are towards the tip top, but your coin flip games aren't really there. It's kind of a schedule loaded with top teams and then easy teams. So I think this leaves sort of a narrow range of outcomes right around their win total. I'm interested in betting unders if you can find plus money, just because I have serious questions with parts of their roster. Alan Bowman's 74th most efficient quarterback last year. He's in his 7th year. I mean, I think we kind of know what he is right now. Like, how much development are you making year 6 to year 7? I don't know. I don't think it's significant. The O-line is good, so that is potentially something that can help him. You basically have everyone back there. Some players are better than others, but you do have a couple studs. I think your tackle position is especially good with like Dalton Cooper and Jake Springfield back. Running game is awesome. Ollie Gordon's behind that unit. There's nothing behind Ollie Gordon, so that's somewhat of a concern. If he goes down, you're probably screwed. I don't know. Receivers are great. So, I mean, it's kind of just Bowman holding back this offense, assuming there's no injuries. Defense is a big concern for me, however. You've got 10 players back, but this defense was 93rd. Who on this defense is really any good? You don't turn to the transfer portal really anywhere, and the guys you bring in are really low level. Like, they have one defensive back transfer, that's Kobe Hilton from UTEP. You have one transfer on the defensive line from Gannon. I don't even know what level of competition Gannon is.
No.
So you don't have any they lost their best defender too, Anthony Goodlow, on the edge. I mean, one of their second best defenders, Xavier Benson's gone. Like, who is back for this unit that was any good whatsoever? So I'm not high on the defense. That's going to be a problem. If you have a shootout team like hanging on the back of Alan Bowman, I don't know, man. But with the win total and the narrow range outcomes, I don't want to bet that, but I do want to short this team like week to week when we get into conference play, especially. If they handle business against South Dakota State, who knows against Arkansas, and then they should kill Tulsa. So maybe against like Utah or something, short them.
That'll be a fascinating game. Yeah, you mentioned late September. That'll be in Stillwater. Probably be a very competitive spread as well. And I feel the same way. I'm interested to see as we get to the next team if you feel the same way about UCF. This is a team that I think could be a little more actionable for me. 7.5 win total right here. Always dangerous. What do you make of them? Over, under, threat to compete in this conference, or just kind of a middling team?
This team is good, and they're going to be even better. Somehow, as far as these teams making jumps to new conferences, they have almost seamlessly moved up to this level. They're recruiting really well. If this team continues to recruit at this level, they are going to be the favorite of the Big 12 in no time. 39th this year, 22nd in transfers. They're located in an area where you have a chance to take some recruits and poach them from bigger schools, and some of the high recruits that are from South Florida, Central Florida, that don't work out at big schools and want to stay closer to home. This is a perfect step down in competition. Still Power 4, good competition, but you're not in the SEC. You're not in the Big Ten. So they benefit from all this, and they're putting together good rosters. You just haven't had Malzahn there long enough to really stack these classes where they're seniors now. So I think they still have a little bit of room to go in the future. As far as this roster goes, bringing in KJ Jefferson is an awesome substitute for John Rhys Plumlee. Your backfield is loaded. They were already loaded last year with RJ Harvey and Johnny Richardson, and then they had Miles Montgomery, Penny Boone, and they have a 4-star freshman. I mean, it's one of the best running back rooms in the entire country. Probably your biggest concern on offense is replacing Javon Baker, but Kobe Hudson and Xavier Townsend were both good. They bring in Jarvarius Johnson from Auburn. They have other transfers like Florida transferred Trent Whitmore last year. Kentucky transferred Chauncey Magwater all there. There's a lot of talent in this receiver room, so I'm not really that concerned. Tight end should be better with Randy Pittman a second year. Offensive line, I think, is pretty solid. You have 2 departures, but you go and you bring in Wes Dorsey from Western Kentucky, Keegan Smith from Central Michigan. They have 4-star freshmen on this team too at the offensive line. So it's just like a better talent profile than a lot of teams. Defense is loaded with transfers, and they had pretty solid experience across the board. One area that's really awesome for UCF that differs from a lot of teams in this conference is their D-line. They have 4 defensive tackles back with starting experience over 300 snaps. Their edge group is awesome. To complement Malachi Lawrence, they add Nigel Kelly from Miami. Good linebacker transfers. The biggest questions are at defensive back, but they brought in 8 transfers on top of 3 returning starters. So I think they can probably piece that together with 11 guys that are potentially getting into this, which doesn't even include like a transfer from last year who didn't play a ton, Jakari Henderson, who's a 4-star. I really like this team. I think the schedule's a little harder than some of the other teams we talked about, but your non-con is still New Hampshire, Sam Houston, which would be 2 wins. And then traveling to Florida, who knows what Florida looks like, by week 5 or whatever that is after their gauntlet. I think this is a team that's interesting on their win total. They do play some of the tough teams, so I'm kind of more interested in taking a look at them just to win the Big 12. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally get it because there's definitely there are paths where they just lose to the good teams. They win all the teams, beat all the teams they're supposed to, and they land at 8-4, and you cash over 7.5, and you call it a day. But there's also a lot of correlation, of course, if they knock off Utah, if they knock off some of these other teams that are competing, you're going to get obviously a much bigger payout in a Big 12 future or something like that. This is a dangerous team. I'm definitely bullish on them. You mentioned all the transfers. I'm a big Jefferson fan. If they can keep him upright, I think they piece it together nicely. And I think there's a real chance, looking at their schedule, that they could be undefeated going into that Florida game. It's manageable to get through TCU and Colorado. They're getting through the first 2. So I like this team. I think there's definitely upside with UCF this year.
I think there is too. And if you are playing conference stuff, Florida doesn't matter. So like a conference championship.
Yep.
And that's maybe their toughest game. Florida is the best team on their schedule. I'm sorry to Utah, West Virginia, Iowa State. I love those teams. And Florida might have a much lower win total than them. That's a product of who they play, not their talent.
No doubt about it. All right. We talked through I don't want to call them the big four, but we got 4 down. We got a bunch more to go. I do want to mention, though, a couple things right off the top. One, if you're checking out the video and you want a different conference, it's all going to be here on the Odd Chopper YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, share, all of that good stuff. And if you want more, if you want to get inside the ropes, again, our brand new marketplace it's literally brand new. What is it? It's a spot where you can get more access to the people you see on this channel and many others. We're bringing them all in. It's going to be all different sports. You can find the package that works for you. Some people will be dropping game lines. Some people will be dropping data. Some people will be dropping other things. Find what works for you. We just say, go to the marketplace and see what you got. You see me right here. I've been betting all sorts of greasy things. If you want to try it for a week, we'd love to have you. I'd love to have you as part of my channel so you can come on in and see what we're about. But really, really exciting stuff at Odd Chopper. And of course, we also have all the tools under the premium EV tools section. Totally different. But if that works for you, more power to you. Another great way to get a lot of value out there. Is there going to be any value on this team who's a kind of a mystery team in my mind? And you mentioned them already. It's Kansas. On one of the episodes, I don't remember which one. I think it may have been the SEC one, but you were mentioning some of the more talented coaches out there. And to me, this guy, I mean, what he's done with a team that was just a dumpster fire for like a decade plus. You know, he came in from Buffalo. First of all, I want to just ask you kind of philosophically, how did they keep this guy? I assumed that he would just depart at some point.
Yeah, I think it's probably a situation where he's just like waiting for the right job. He's probably making, like enough money where he doesn't need to clear a check. But I don't know. I don't know his salary just like off the top of my head. But then what do you want to take, like the Duke job, or, like go to a dumpster fire program who's at the top? If you can't get like a Texas A&M or something like that, who's kind of built to change right away, you might just be better off like hanging in Kansas, especially because like they have a clear path to winning this championship. They're going to be hyper competitive because he's what he built. So I don't know, maybe if like Clemson would open up or something like that, he'd probably take a great job. But I think some of these guys are just not as willing to go to the Virginias, the Baylors, these programs that are really hard to win at, where he already is winning at a really hard program. So why change if it's already working? Anyway, that's just my take. I actually don't know.
No, he's an incredible, like I said, shout out to Lance, because guy knows what he's doing. I just very impressive.
He's won it everywhere he's been. He won at Whitewater. He won at Buffalo. He's winning at Kansas, which he should get the Nobel Peace Prize for.
It's incredible. It's really incredible. And just to see, you're talking about serious win totals here. This is 8 and 8.5. Obviously, you're going to be laying juice on the obvious side, either the push equity with 8, or if you're shorting them under 8.5, obviously you can short them here for plus money. What do you make of Kansas this year?
I like this team a lot. And for the record, rather than taking like Kansas State, Utah, Oklahoma State at the top, I don't have vast differences in my power ratings between those 3 teams in UCF, Kansas, West Virginia, and forgetting one of them, Iowa State. That's the one. Like these Kansas, Iowa State, UCF around 10-1. Shop it. Obviously, you might be able to find better. I have a lot of interest in those payouts just because they are so close to the top. And Kansas roster's right on par with some of these other teams. Jalen Daniels, he needs to stay healthy. That is a concern. But he's been awesome when he's played. 2023, 2022, elite dual threat. He completed 75% of his passes for 9.5 yards per attempt in the brief time we saw him last year. And back in 2022, he was at 9 yards per attempt and 66% completion. So the sample's pretty big on him being a hyper-efficient quarterback. It's just the health. But, I mean, talk about Leipold and this offense. They got good snaps out of Cole Ballard when Jason Beam got hurt last year. So, I don't know. It's kind of like Utah where they're just so well coached. Offensive line, I think, is really good and underrated. They returned 3 players that are starters. They have a couple guys that are really important losses, especially Dominic Pooney. But they bring in some good transfers. Bryce Foster, Amir Herring. Those are 2 former 4-stars, top 100 recruits. You have Daryl Simmons from Iowa State, so another power transfer. Dre Doran started in 2021, and then they just brought in some talent, so he hasn't needed to start for a while, but he has starting experience in the depths. They also have 5-star Wisconsin transfer Logan Brown. He was with the team last year, but he was hurt all year. So this depth is quietly really good, and they've been stacking it. Defense, I think it's a little better than some people are giving it credit for. Their weakness is pretty clear. It's inside. They lost some players from their interior and their edge group, and it's going to need to come together. Fortunately, this is where they're focusing their recruiting efforts. They have a pair of 4-star edges this year. Maybe some of them kick inside if they gain weight. I'm not sure. But you bring in former 4-star Bai Jobe from Michigan State. There's talent. It's just not proven. And then you also have some pretty decent returners. Jerome Robinson on the edge was solid last year. DJ Withers was pretty solid inside. I guess the bigger concern for me is, what do you do on the interior? Do you have to move an edge? I don't know. It is a power run conference, so that is a concern. Linebacker, I think, is decent. You have returners there. The secondary is elite. So this is a team where, if Kansas takes the opening kickoff and you're forced to throw against them, that is not going to be a great path for winning against them. Kobe Bryant, Mello Dotson, Marvin Grant, OJ Burrows. These guys are all awesome players. Bringing Devin Dye from Utah State, strong transfer. I mean, it's a good defense. The only question I really have is, what does this interior look like? Can they put it together? If they can't, they're in for some tough games, but definitely fewer questions compared to some other teams. It's kind of just, can Jalen Daniels stay healthy, and can they get a great defensive tackle? And we'll see. But the schedule's somewhat reasonable. You got a lot of hard games, especially in non-con. You have to travel to Illinois, and then you bring in UNLV, but it's kind of a scary UNLV team. It's kind of like what we just talked about with UCF. If they put it all together, I think I'd rather just take the big payout on them winning the Big 12. And you can sprinkle a couple of these because they're so long. It's not like you need to plant your flag on just UCF or just Kansas. You just need like one or two of them to come out of there and have a chance at it, which is the way I like to play it.
Yeah, you mentioned a little tricky schedule. Don't overlook Lindenwood, where they get things started. Shout out to Lindenwood, who plays Division I basketball now. It should be a 65-point spread. But yeah, they've got, West Virginia. They've got Kansas State, Iowa State. There's some games, but this is a dangerous team. And you mentioned kind of the next dangerous team.
Oh, one last thing. They're not playing their home games at home.
Yeah,
that is worth noting.
Definitely worth noting. Definitely worth noting. Hard to quantify, but it's something, no doubt about it. Because they're strong home field everywhere, and this place is no different. Certainly, Iowa State has very difficult home field advantage. They've had it for some time. We talked about them in the win total show, so I know that you're pretty bullish on them, and you've mentioned them as a dark horse to compete in this conference. Just quickly go over, for people that didn't see that show, what you think about the Cyclones.
Yeah, out of the 10-ish to 1 teams, this is my favorite. Honestly, if you have one you prefer more than Iowa State, sprinkle them. I think all 3 of them are live, but if you force me to pick one, it would be this team. So many issues last year, from the gambling scandal to injuries, forced them to play one of the youngest lineups in the country. I believe they were 5th youngest among all teams, which is just unbelievable. And I like the coaching staff. They've won here in the past with better teams. And, they weren't so bad with worse teams last year. They also put it together towards the end of the year when you started to see them play a lot better. Experience-wise, all these freshmen, they played another year under their belt, not really too concerned. It's a good coaching staff, so I think they will be coached up. Even guys you wouldn't classify as your returning starters have starts. Like Abu Sama played significantly at the end of the year. He didn't hit 300 snaps, but we saw him start games and handle a full workload. Every offensive lineman back, every receiver of consequence back. Rocco Beck played quietly really well behind an offensive line that was leaky, that did get better throughout the year. Basically every starter back on defense, 10 of 11, only one of your corners is gone. You bring in Ryan Robinson from LSU, 4-star recruit. This team is loaded. Comes down to schedule. You go to Iowa in non-con. They can win that game. They'll be underdogs. I honestly might bet them. Other 2 non-con toss-up, or I guess not toss-ups. They should be pretty easy games for them to win. At Houston should be a win. Baylor, they should beat them. Texas Tech, Cincinnati. Those are all games I consider pretty easy wins, but you do play most of the top of this conference. Kansas, at Utah, at West Virginia is a tricky trip. And then you get UCF at home. It's like some of the other teams we talked about. We need this all to go right rather than hit their win total. I'd rather just bet them to win the conference. That's wide open. It's around 10-1. If you shop it, you might be able to find better.
Seems like there's a little bit of a drop off now as we get into kind of the middling zone. There is a couple teams that I'm bullish on. I'm not sure Arizona is one of them, though. I don't really know what's left here. We talked about the great coaching job at Kansas, and there was one at Arizona, and now Washington gets to reap those benefits. 7.5 wins for Arizona. What's left for the Wildcats here?
Completely new staff. I'm not a huge Brent Brennan guy. Middling success with San Jose State. He did build them a little bit. They were horrific when he got there, and they did get better, so that's worth noting. But I'm not sure that works in his favor year one when his recruiting class is ranked 85th in the country. And, you know, they did lose a lot of guys. Jed Fish took guys with him. Some of them went to the NFL. It was a good team. You bring in Dino Babers, who's changing the offense. He runs a really complex system, so I'm not sure, like, year one is the time to bet on this either. It's going to be a lot of like spread stuff. I don't know if they have the personnel for it. Ted McMillan's a stud, but who are your other receivers? You lost Cowing. I mean, Malachi Riley, Montana Lamonius Craig, Romello Murphy from Old Dominion. It's not a strong group. Your offensive line is a serious concern. You kind of had just one anchor in Jordan Morgan. He didn't play in the bowl game, and they kind of got wrecked. The presumed left tackle, Raymond Polito, is out for this season. They just went into the portal yesterday and added Joey Capra from Utah State or Nevada. I get those two. Nevada it is. He was below average there. So I don't know. You're dipping into the portal in August after camp has started to pull guys out. The O-line, I think, is going to be a big concern. The defense is a transfer job too. And that was one of the weaknesses of them last year. They do not have the interior presence. This was kind of like a feeding frenzy for Bill Norton and Savea coming in and just taking these defensive tackles away from this team. The guys you brought in are not high-level transfers. So I don't know. I do not have high hopes for this Arizona team in year one. You also get Kansas State and non-con. That's one of those previously scheduled games. Sure, New Mexico and Northern Arizona give you a solid runway, but traveling to Manhattan in your third game is a non-conference game. I do not like Arizona. You can find 8s out there. I think this is a pretty solid under bet and one of my favorites.
Texas Tech, another team that, again, they've had their moments. Obviously, Michael Crabtree is now walking through that door. It's been quite some time from when they were really at the top, but they're always talk about a tricky out. Going to Lubbock is never easy. Another 7.5 win total. Are they simply a spoiler in this conference, or is this a team that you do think can make some real noise?
They're tricky. They're kind of a post-type sleeper. After last year, they were kind of everyone's dark horse to win this conference. I don't know. First off, I don't love the schedule. At Arizona, at TCU, at Iowa State, at Oklahoma State, West Virginia at home. Those road trips don't leave you much wiggle room, and then you have a bunch of teams in the middle of this conference too. Colorado, Baylor, Cincinnati. Those teams aren't at the pure bottom. The only horrific team you play is Arizona State. Washington State, that's another road trip. North Texas isn't complete toss-up, so I don't love the schedule. You also have significant questions here. They were really injured last year, but who is Baron Morton? Is he any good? I'm not sure. He has shown flashes, and then he's been horrible. Last year, horrific season, 108th in total efficiency, more turnover-worthy plays than big-time throws. He did play injured, so it's hard to separate this from just the injury. Was it a lack of talent, or was it the injury? The offensive line has one returning starter. Do not like the guys they brought in. Receiver, it's basically, can the 5-star freshman Micah Hudson step up for this team? Caleb Douglas got beat out at Florida. Josh Kelly, he's a solid starter, but it's not the Big 12. So I don't know. I think the ceiling of this receiving core relies on this 5-star freshman. Is he ready to go right away? He didn't play a lot in the spring, so he's been forced into the fire, and I think he will be early on for Texas Tech. A lot of questions on offense. The defense, this team returns 8 players with 300 snaps. They were 53rd last year. So I think we're looking at probably an average defense overall. The guys you bring in don't inspire much confidence. Your interior is a question. Your 2 transfers are from Nevada and Rice. Those are good transfers at their level of competition, but now they're stepping up. They've already had injuries on their defensive line, too. They lost Trayvon McAlpine and Dylan Spencer. Those guys were expected to play in rotation. Linebacker's pretty good, but also concerns in the secondary. So it's a team I'm going to be down on. I think unders are live with this team.
You can get minus 105 on either side. So you're really just straight evaluation here. I lean to the under as well. It's not my favorite in the conference, but you mentioned like 10 legitimate questions. Not that many answers. I don't feel confident on anything. I think there's definitely chances it works out, but there's also chances they just like lose to Washington State and then start a gauntlet and it just completely unravels for this team. So
I don't know if they brought in a single good transfer outside of like Josh Kelly. Like every transfer on defense, they brought in 4 defensive back transfers. One of them's from Gulf University.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know where that is.
No.
One of them's from Fairmont State. They took Michael Harrison Pilot from Houston, who was a 4-star receiver recruit, and moved him to corner. Like, what is this team doing?
It's not great. West Virginia, on the other hand, I like this team. I talked to you. I said I think they're live. Caused some real problems right to the start of the season. Morgantown is just not an easy place to play. 6.5 wins, minus 128 to the over. I can work with this. What do you expect for West Virginia this year?
I love this team. The schedule is just really hard.
It is. It is.
Penn State, Kansas, at Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Kansas State, at Arizona, at Cincinnati, UCF, Texas Tech. Sheesh. I mean, who are their gimmies? Albany, at Pitt. I think you could consider at Cincinnati and Baylor. Pretty easy wins. They're closer to toss-ups, but West Virginia should handle them. Say you get all 4 of those, you need to pick off 3 others. I think they can do it. I'm just not sure I agree with it at the number. But, I mean, like, I love this team. I want to bet them. I had a serious life crisis yesterday when I was trying to bet them against Penn State in week 1, and I live in Wisconsin. It's a disaster. I can't find a plus 10.5. I'm on Odd Shopper. I see all these 10.5s.
Yep.
Just like, I can't. Like, do I have to move to Illinois? Seriously?
Come on in. Take the train down. Not come on in because I don't live in Illinois, but I hear the train goes right into Chicago. Yeah, I hear you. Because at 10.5, I think that's what we're going to see, though. You know, yes, they are not going to be favorite in a lot of those games, but they'll be inside a touchdown, I bet, against a lot of these teams. These are toss-ups, 60-40, 55-45 type numbers, and I think they do pick off a handful of them.
I have them as the 4th best roster in this conference.
They got talent.
They have a lot of talent. And I guess to talk about that quickly, Garrett Green is back. He had an awesome season. This guy was the 9th most efficient quarterback in college football. 31 big-time throws, 8 turnover-worthy plays. Only 8. Awesome throwing the ball deep. And he was top 10 in on-target drop percentage. He could have, he would never win the Heisman just because West Virginia is not good enough. But, man, this was quietly an amazing season from Garrett Green. He can move, too. His receivers are better. There's this freshman they have, Farmer, who's getting a ton of hype. They bring in Jaden Bray from Oklahoma State, Justin Robinson from Mississippi State. They already have Clement back. Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson are 2 elite running backs. 5 players on your offensive line with over 300 snaps of starting experience because of injuries. And you bring in Ballsy from Jacksonville State, who was awesome. The defense is a concern. It was a concern last year. Basically, it's kind of, can you tidy up this secondary? Because they were okay up front and they were above average in run defense. Can you clean up a secondary that was legitimately one of the worst in the entire country? So they bring back both their safeties. Those were 2 of the stronger players in the secondary. So I don't think that's a big concern. Then you go to the transfer portal and you bring in 7 guys. Who are they? TJ Crandall was a solid starter at Colorado State. Hopefully he can make the jump. But the 2 guys I really like are Garnett Hollis from Northwestern and Jaheim Joseph for Northwestern. They played well in the Big Ten. So those guys I think should be able to transfer right over. Dantes Fagan from Charlotte was also awesome. So I think you have 2 guys based on the level of competition you can reasonably expect to play well. And then you have 3 others in Crandall, Fagan, and Tarnu from Jacksonville State, who was a starter, to just fill 1 spot. Can one of those 3 guys who already played really well at lower levels of competition step up? I think they probably can. And plus, like, so many injuries. Josiah Trotter didn't play at all last year, linebacker. He's been getting a ton of hype in camp. I guess we'll have to see, but they're for sure deeper at linebacker with Reed Carrico coming in, Beiser hopefully healthy, Cutter coming back, Lathan coming back. I think the defense is sneaky, maybe a top 50 defense in the country. And last year they were 84th. And I think they have a chance to maybe even like push top 30-ish if these defensive back transfers can get it together.
I'm in. I like I said, I like this team. I think they're going to battle. They're going to be an extremely tough out. I'm going to be betting them week to week, but I also think if you're making a large portfolio, they get to 7 or even 8. I think they're just a quality squad that's being overlooked. TCU will always be near and dear to my heart because one of the better calls in the betting you history was you were very bullish on them when they made their miracle run. Those days, I think, are long gone, but 7.5 wins, it is juiced to the under. What can we expect from this team who's certainly is going to have to pick off a few upsets, I think, to get over this win total?
Another brutal schedule. This is similar to West Virginia. Like, holy smokes. Utah has got like a cupcake schedule relative to this. This team is weird. So they go to the national championship. They come back with a 5-win season last year. They fired the defensive coordinator that was kind of, I don't know, not credited with winning there, but he definitely got a lot of praise. Now Joe Gillespie's coaching in high school. You bring in Andy Avalos from Boise State. He previously was with Oregon. I don't know if I like him. He runs a weird defensive scheme, a lot of 3-3-5. But the second he comes in and messes with the defense, your best player on the defensive line, Demonic, transfers out. I don't know. I guess at Oregon they were pretty good, but he had so much more talent there than at Boise. It's hard to separate. So I'm not in love with the hire. We'll see. That's really the only change they made on staff among the actual players that matter among their coordinators. Josh Hoover at quarterback, what is he? I'm not 100% sure. 70th most efficient quarterback last year, basically the same amount of throws, big-time throws as turnover-worthy plays. He doesn't run. So I don't know. Ken Seals is behind him, Ben. I know you love good old Ken Seals. O-line is basically going to be a transfer job. You have 2 returning starters. Those guys are okay. But then you brought in 5 transfers. One of them, Cade Bennett, who was slotted in to start, already got hurt for the year. I do think like Bless Harris, James Brockermeyer, Remington Strickland, and Carson Bruno, the transfers are pretty good. You just don't have a ton of depth here, so it's a slight concern. Running back and receiver are loaded. I love these positions. If the offensive line can hold up with these transfers, and again, these are pretty good transfers like Florida State, Alabama, Texas A&M. They have a good chance of holding up. You're throwing to Eric McAllister from Boise, Drake Dabney at tight end from Baylor. You still have J.P. Richardson, Savion Williams. The former elite recruit Cam Cook is running at the head of this backfield. There's a lot of really talented players among the skill position players, so you just need the O-line to hold up a little bit, and hopefully Hoover can game manage his way through this schedule. The defense, I think, should be better. So on the Avalos hire, there was a lot of talent with this defense, and there were players that just took a nosedive last year that played really well in 2020, and I just didn't understand. Like Bud Clark had an awesome 2022 season, then he played shockingly bad last year. So it's just like, what happened with this defense? And I don't have the answer, but I think making a change was necessary. So some of the guys they have back that should be pretty decent. 3 on the defensive line. You bring in some great transfers. Osafa Mensah from Notre Dame's a high recruit. Dial from Tulane was an awesome player there. Ajijolai from Houston's a starter. You get another starter at linebacker, Caleb Elam's-Orr, in addition to your 3 returning defenders. You have 4 returning starters at defensive back. This is by snaps, not just raw starts. And then you bring in 7 transfers, some of them better than others, like Lemarian James from Old Dominion. I think he's one to highlight. And Jays Oliver from Tulsa, Cam Smith, Memphis. Austin Jordan's from Texas, so we got a high recruit there. You do have to piece together a lot, but I think I'm higher than market on TCU. I think the best way to play this is honestly just look at Stanford. Stanford, it's away, but this team was horrific last year. They're now in year 2. They got a ton of 4-stars back, but these guys were bad last year. Are we really going all the way out on TCU and all the way in on Stanford? This line has moved like 6 points already. I don't know, man. I think I might just buy TCU in week 1. I'm not 100% sure, though.
Yeah, I do think it's going to be a team that will evolve quickly, and certainly how I'm judging them. I don't know. I don't have a great feel for this team, and you don't need That's one of the benefits you have. You don't have to have a position on their win total. Sure, I'll be betting them during the year, maybe shorten them as well, but they're just kind of an enigma. Colorado, Neon Dion, obviously a team gets a ton of buzz. That was there are no locks in sports betting, but if there was one, it was when they went to Oregon last year and disgraced themselves. I've never been so confident in an individual spot in my entire life. It was a fascinating year for them. They started last year shocking TCU, actually. And then they, got into the thick of it and it didn't work out. A lot of moving parts, some big time, guys transferred out, but they brought in an overhaul as well. 5.5, too high, too low, just right. What do you think about Buffaloes?
It's a really hard schedule, but a talented team. I think their only gimme win is Baylor, which is very not good for a win total. But I think they're going to play spoilers, some of these teams. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if they beat Nebraska, Colorado State, any of the top teams. I wouldn't be shocked if they beat them. This is a depth issue for me. Again, your transfer class is awesome, but this is the second year in a row you've turned over your roster. Yep. I think the best way to put this is Colorado has higher end talent than a lot of teams in this conference. They do not have the depth behind him. Behind Shedeur, nothing. Shedor's awesome. He's probably he might be the best quarterback in this conference. I think you could reasonably argue that. But if he's gone, this team is cooked. You have Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn, Will Shepard, and LeJontay Wester. Not a ton behind him. I think receivers pretty deep. Offensive line, complete transfer job. I like some of the guys you brought in. You have UTEP, UConn, Houston, Indiana, FIU, Texas, Clemson, Michigan State, and Villanova represented in this group. All the guys from elite teams like the Texas, Clemson, and what was the last one? Michigan State. Those are all former 4-stars. So you have a lot of talent on the offensive line. Plus you have a freshman 5-star left tackle in Jordan Seaton. That group should be good. Just depth questions. Defense, it's the same thing. Ton of transfers. And some of these guys are awesome. Like BJ Green and Deion Hayes, sniping those guys from Arizona State and Pitt. Those, like, Narduzzi's got to be having nightmares, sleepless nights over losing Deion Hayes and he's getting trolled by Deion. I don't know. We don't have to go through every transfer. It's just that's the thing. Really good transfers up top. They're going to be even more reliant on good injury luck compared to other teams. But the other thing is just like people hate Deion. So I don't think you ever have like against Colorado teams are never looking ahead. This is impossible to quantify, but you're constantly getting other teams' best shot. I mean, I think about this from like a workplace perspective. A lot of coaches view Deion as a guy that's like hasn't earned it in college football yet, but he's still getting these national TV spots, all this recognition. And what has he done? He hasn't done anything. So I don't know. You're always getting team's best shot, which I don't like either.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that a little last year. I mean, teams were ready. Even the Oregon game, there was all that pregame hype, and obviously they just outclassed them. But it's not an easy schedule. I'm a little freaked out by the turnover. It may take some. The thing that sucks for Colorado, it's going to take, I think, a little time to gel, and they don't really have that time. You've got North Dakota State and Baylor, but like you're playing Nebraska in week 2. Colorado State should have beat them last year in one of the wildest games I've ever seen. It's not that easy immediately, and then you get into the thick of it. You go to the bounce house. You've got Kansas State, at Arizona, Cincinnati stinks, at Texas Tech, Utah, Kansas, Oklahoma State. There's a chance you go like 1-6 to close the year. I'm worried about that. I'm not buying Colorado. I'm not selling them just yet, but I'm not that high on them.
North Dakota State's the number 1 team in FCS. That line is like 6 points.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's no gimme. The Dakotas have it on lock. Them and South Dakota State have dynasties now.
I'm probably going to bet Colorado, though. Like, North Dakota State has been getting pounded in the market. Like, are we serious with this? Colorado probably has, like... Yeah, I mean, they're good in the FCS, but Colorado has, like, 6 guys that are going to play in the NFL.
They're lucky they're not playing South Dakota State. South Dakota State's...
That's the number 2 team, right?
That's the magic team. They can't be beat. Well, we'll say. All right. Cincinnati. Okay. They're a team that they got their shot a couple years ago. They were the team, and didn't really work out. Desmond Ridder and co. And now what are they? They're just kind of a middling team. That might be putting it generously. 5.5 wins, straight toss up, -110 on both sides. Where's this team at? Are they going, are they on the right path or are they just stuck in neutral?
They're 51st in recruiting, so it's kind of stuck in neutral. I don't think you're
Feels that
quite
way.
good enough to compete yet. Transfers, I mean, this is definitely not Luke Fickell, I'll tell you that. But I don't like their coach. Satterfield is not a guy I like, for the record. Basically, to sum it all up, this is a shootout team. Their defense is bad. You do bring in a new DC. I just don't think you have a lot of talent to work with. There's 12 transfers on this defense. You bring back 5 guys that have starting experience. This is kind of I think, a horrific defense. And then you've got like the Dante Corleone blood clot situation, which I think he's going to play. He's by far your best player, but we're kind of delving into territory with the blood clots where flip a coin if he plays. Like, I don't know. It's not like an ACL tear where you can reasonably expect 9 to 12 months if everything goes correctly. Like the blood clots, who knows? Offense, they've got a great offensive line. That should be a power run game. I think they'll have a lot of success running in this conference. The question is, with this defense, when they go down in games, you're turning to Brennan Sorsby, the Indiana transfer. What is he? The 102nd most efficient quarterback from last year. That was a dumpster fire at Indiana. So is there potentially an untapped ceiling? I mean, maybe. I think you have one good receiver in Xavier Henderson. Tyron Smith from Utah, Tony Johnson. I mean, these guys don't inspire me. The lucky thing is they play an easy schedule.
They do.
The problem is I think they don't win all their winnable games. So you have, let's see, Towson, Pittsburgh, Miami, Ohio. That's away. That's the best team in the MAC for the record. Houston, Arizona State, Colorado. So you've got a lot of rebuilding teams in this conference, but like at Colorado, we just talked about their roster. Colorado has a better roster straight up. The only issue with, the Colorado game is it's somewhat late in the year. And with that schedule, how beat up are they? I'm not sure. So I don't really want to chalk that up as a win or loss. Arizona State, that team stinks. Houston, Donovan Smith is at least competent, so I don't want to write them off. Miami, Ohio is the best team in the MAC. Pitt is this greasy team. We'll talk about them in a little bit when we get to the ACC. That team's bad, but would you be surprised if they drop 1 or 2 of those games?
So I think it comes down to the first 4 games. Obviously 4-0, you're cooking. 3-1 will remain to be seen. If you're 2-2, it's over. If you're 1-3, they should shut down the program, but that's neither here nor there. If you're 1-3, just stop playing. But that's what I think it comes down to. Obviously, you're going to beat Towson, but Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh, Miami of Ohio, and Houston. I think you can go 2-1 in those games and be okay. Obviously, 3-0. You can't drop multiple though, because then you get into the thick of it. And sure, you could pick off Arizona State, and sure, you could beat Colorado. I don't see much equity to beat UCF, Texas Tech, West Virginia, Iowa State, Kansas State, even TCU. It may come down to that last game. Not for me. I'm leaning under. You mentioned some of the D-line issues. Not great for Cincinnati right now.
No, they already lost Micah Coleman, one of their transfers. I think it's pretty appropriately priced. I lean with you. It would be under, but it would only be if you're playing 6 or 7 futures from this conference. There's others I like more.
They're great. Arizona State is up next. We're getting to the cellar, to the bottom, and this team is just bad. We talked about them as well, I believe, on the win total show, so we don't need to get crazy here, but it's at 4.5. It's very, very juiced to the under. Let me see what we've got on DraftKings here. Also 4.5, very juiced to the under, so you can comfortably project for under 4.5 wins, but you do have to adjust that break-even point for that type of vig. What do we got going on in the desert, though?
I have them favored in 2 games, and their non-con is no joke. You play Wyoming, who's a good team. Mississippi State, that's an SEC team. Even though they're at the bottom, they're going to be an underdog. And then you go to Texas State, arguably the best team in the Sun Belt. So no easies in non-con. You can't play yourself. And then you've got BYU. That's about it for winnable games, because this roster is horrendous. I think Sam Levitt has basically locked up this job. I think he gives them the most upside. He's the 2023 4-star, but we don't know. The offensive line he's playing behind is bad. I don't think he has any good skill position players. I'm not a Scatterbo guy. I thought he was wildly inefficient. He caught a lot of balls, but that team was just so bad they force-fed him. Now you have Raleek Brown and Alton McCaskill. I don't think he's going to have the same role. You lost your best receiver as a late transfer. You have no one to replace him. Jordan Tyson, one of the backups, is already in a boot. Defense is not good. I don't buy the transfers they brought in. I mean, kind of feel bad for this coaching staff, man. Coaching staff that I kind of like with Kenny Dillingham, but he's having a real rough go of it this year. Easy under for me.
It's not good, but there are 2 teams below them, so we'll see. And we'll get to BYU in a second. But we're going to start with Houston, who I'm not saying Houston is going to be super relevant. They do have some things that I liked, and honestly, 3.5 wins. I was a little surprised. Now, it's always a product of who you play, and I think that's going to come into play very quickly when we talk about them. But is it that bad down there that they're only at 3.5, even if it is juiced to the over?
I think so. It's year 1 for Willie Fritz. Love Willie Fritz, but I think it's going to be pretty damn hard for him to get it together so quickly this year. They're 60th in recruiting, transfers everywhere, 1 offensive lineman back, not in love with the guys they brought in. You lost, I think, your best receiver in Matthew Golden, so Joseph Manjak's your best player. You lost your only 4-star freshman at receiver in Jayshawn Rigdle. That's a huge problem. Defense, it's all transfers, some of them better than others, but you just have so far to go. The edge group was their best unit. They only have 1 defensive lineman back, 1 linebacker, 1 safety. I mean, what are we really doing here with Houston? They have enough good players where I think they probably scare someone and maybe pull off an upset, but for locking up your money all season, it's not something I'm going to do.
No, and it's a weird schedule. Like UNLV and Rice, sure. Obviously Oklahoma, that's very bad. Cincinnati, BYU, Baylor. There's games. There's definitely games. But there's also a chance you go like 1-11. There is that equity for this team. It could be.
They already lost one of their stud transfers in defense. Corey Platt, he tore his Achilles. I don't know.
The bottom, the last team. Before we talk about BYU, I'm just going to say again, real quick. We love doing these shows.
Did we skip Baylor?
Oh, you know what? We skipped Baylor. What a world.
They're largely skippable.
Baylor. Great. This is going to be good. Wait till I have to go back for these timestamps. That's going to be fun. All right, Baylor. Sorry, Baylor. You know what? That's what you get for the Art Briles situation. Here we go. 5.5 wins. Straight coin toss. You've mentioned them a lot in this show, but mostly as a team, as that swing team. Like you have to beat Baylor to get over your win total. What does Baylor have to do to get over their win total?
They need to beat their 4 cupcakes in Tarleton, Air Force, BYU, and Houston. And then they need to knock off a bunch of teams they probably won't knock off. You need to get at least 2 more. Colorado's probably the closest thing you have to a lock there. Texas Tech second, but I don't think they win both those games. I'll be looking to an under here. This is Dave Aranda's last stand, and I do not think it's going to go well. He made a very curious change at coordinator. He brings in Jake Spavital. This was one of the heaviest 12 personnel teams in the country. Love to run the ball. Now you're turning up-tempo, air raid under Spavital. Your roster's not built for it. At quarterback, you have DeQuan Finn. He's a dual threat, like power run quarterback from Toledo. I don't know. Your receivers are bad. The only guy I really respect is Monterey Baldwin. Your transfers all come from really low-level competition. Your offensive line has 5 starters. You bring in plenty of transfers. That unit should be the best. But again, you're turning to the air raid. Are you even utilizing the offensive line to the best of its ability? I don't think so. Defense, you have 11 starters back with over 300 snaps. The only unit they were top 100 in was pass rush, and they were 96th. So it's kind of like, all right, you got a lot of starters back, but are they any good? I personally don't really think so. So Baylor is a team I am not in on.
Yeah, Baylor. Obviously, I'm not too high on them considering I forgot to even mention them when we did this. So, yeah, it's just kind of a weird schedule. You mentioned Tarleton, Air Force. Where's their third non-con? Utah. That's very confusing the way this is structured.
Oh yeah, you get a previously scheduled non-con that's now a conference game, but you have to count it as non-con.
Yeah, That's super complicated for these conference futures.
They don't count. So if they lose to Utah, it doesn't count for their conference record. But it is
Yeah.
confusing just because you're going to look at it and in your head, you're going to get confused. I already have a million times.
Yeah, that is very, very confusing. All right. Officially, we're going to talk about BYU now. And I will mention, as I mentioned, if you're looking for more access, you want to jump on week 0, we're going to be doing all sorts of things here in the Odd Shopper community, particularly in the Discord, which is associated with the marketplace, as I already mentioned. Just go to oddshopper.com and find what works for you. That is what I'm going to be pushing because I really believe whether you're someone that likes tools and process or you like content, digging in with the community, sweating out games, talking through, projecting, originating, all that type of stuff. We've got plenty, and then some. We will see you in there. The links are below. BYU 4.5 wins. It's not that bad. It is juiced to the under. Are they the worst team in the Big 12?
I think so, and I only give Houston the benefit of the doubt because of Willie Fritz. I mean, Arizona State maybe contends with them, but they don't have as talented of a roster, that's for sure. If we're going to Gary Bohannon at quarterback, likely. It's either him, Trayson Bourget, who lost the starting job at Western Michigan, McKay Hilston, who lost the starting job at Utah State, or Jake Bretzlaff, who's the incumbent, who was dreadful last year. Quarterback is atrocious. They have receivers I like, so it's very unfortunate that Lassiter, Roberts, Epps, and Hill are going to be suffering through this. The offensive line, I think, is okay. They were really weird and kind of imbalanced last year. 19th in pass blocking, 88th in run blocking. You have 4 guys back, but you lost your stud in Kingsley Suamatia. So I think they're probably similar. Their running back, LJ Martin's already dealing with an injury. We'll see about that. The biggest concern is this defense. I mean, holy smokes, this defense is bad. They have a decent secondary. That's not really a huge concern for me in this conference. The Big 12 has this perception of air raid, and there are a lot of teams that utilize it. There's also a lot of power run games with West Virginia, Kansas State, Utah, Iowa State this year. Up front, this team is so bad. I think probably their best defender, best linebacker for sure, Ben Bywater, medically retired like a week ago. You have no replacement, no chance to replace him because this happened so recently. Like, you can't really dive into the portal right now. Everyone's gone. So you have no returning starts at linebacker. No returning starts at corner. All of your secondary guys are safeties. You have to move guys around to maybe get your best 5 on the field, and someone's probably playing out of position. No returners on the interior. I mean, this team stinks.
How? So explain. I would love to hear this. How are they getting to 5 wins exactly? Okay, you've got Southern Illinois. That's 1.
They're a top 12 team in the FCS. I already did my FCS stuff. That is not a good FCS team to play. They should win, yes, but that is not like playing Samford.
Who else are they supposed to beat exactly?
Houston.
Okay, that's 2.
I mean, Houston's the second. I think Houston's better than this team, so I don't know. They're at home, so maybe it's a pick 'em.
Yeah, it's the last game of the year. Houston. Okay, Arizona State on the road.
They're worse than Arizona State. Not by a lot, but they are worse.
SMU on the road?
They're going to get slaughtered. That line should be like 17.
Wyoming in Laramie? Like,
no thanks.
No. Okay. Can I interest you in like Kansas State, UCF, Kansas, Utah, Oklahoma State? I mean, sure, you got Baylor in there. Where exactly are these wins coming from? I don't see this at all.
I agree with you.
Tough scenes in, I don't even know, maybe Provo. I don't know where BYU
they're in
is.
Provo.
Okay, Provo. Put it on the board for Provo. All right, we went through all these teams. We're going to do a quick recap here. And again, if you have any questions at all, Matt_Gajewski on Twitter, JazzRazBets on Twitter. We're there to help. If you have anything, we're there. Where would you go? Favorite bets? You mentioned some of the futures on these Iowa State type teams. Are those bets, win totals? What are your favorite bets from this conference?
I don't like betting overs on win totals in this conference, largely just because you're going to probably, I think, the top 3 teams are mispriced. And I think they're a lot closer to UCF, Iowa State, Kansas, and West Virginia than the market is indicating. So I'd rather take Flyers to win the Big 12 on those 4 teams. I wouldn't play them all, but I think you could sprinkle your money on 2 of them. My 2 personal favorites are Iowa State and West Virginia. They're the tougher schedules, but you get longer odds with those teams. And again, you have to go through their opponents, the other teams that we talked about, to get there. Wide open conference that someone has to win. So rather than take a win total at like -110, I'd rather have the shot at the bigger payout for something that I do think is live. Unders, however, love some unders. Under on Arizona State, under on Baylor. Those are my top 2. Arizona is also, I think, a decent under team.
I'm going to throw in the team we just talked about for me because I agree with those. And you don't want to do too many, but I think you can pick a couple and they can coexist.
Agreed.
BYU, I have, unless I'm evaluating them wrong, I have winning like 2 games. I just don't see it. I don't see them getting to 4, and 4, you still win. I definitely don't see them getting to 5, and you're laying -125. So I think you have a good selection there. I'm with you. I don't love the top of this conference. I think for me, the one team I'm willing to buy on, and you mentioned conference futures for sure, but I like UCF a lot. I think they're my favorite of that bunch. I just think it's a dangerous team with a ton of talent. I'm a big Jefferson fan in terms of their quarterback room. So it's going to be a fascinating conference. I don't think it's as predictable as some of the others that we've already talked about. There it is, friends. Up and down. ACC and the rest of these conferences are going to be coming up on this same channel here at Odd Chopper. But I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And again, get over to the website, see what we're about, and hope to see you inside the room soon enough. For me, for Matt, and for all of us here, good luck. Enjoy. We'll see you soon with another episode of Betting You.